Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, the Prime Minister addressed Ukrainian MPs today from Downing Street, echoing the words of Winston Churchill, saying that it was the country's finest hour. Christian Eriksen visited a heart screening initiative in West London today that encourages young people to get checked for undiagnosed conditions like the one that caused his cardiac arrest on the pitch last summer. We'll hear from the Brentford star. We'll have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes, also on the way. If you didn't know, the world's biggest super sewer is being built below us here in the capital, and on Friday the team from Thames Tideway finished tunnelling for the project. We'll hear why it's vital to stop sewage pollution in London. And the story of one of England's most uniquely talented and controversial sporting talents, Paul Gascoigne, is told in a new documentary. We'll talk to the filmmaker behind Gazza. But first, Boris Johnson described Ukraine's resistance to the Russian invasion as the country's finest hour when addressing its parliament today. Speaking virtually to their MPs in Kyiv, he set out details of a £300 million plan for extra military support and said the West was too slow to act over Russian aggression.
You have exploded the myth of Putin's invincibility, and you've written one of the most glorious chapters in military history and in the life of your country. The so-called irresistible force of Putin's war machine has broken on the immovable object of Ukrainian patriotism and love of country. This is Ukraine's finest hour. I can announce today from the UK government a new package of support totaling £300 million, including radars to pinpoint the artillery bombarding your cities, heavy lift drones to supply your forces, and thousands of night vision devices. We will carry on supplying Ukraine alongside your other friends with weapons, with funding and humanitarian aid until we have achieved our long-term goal, which must be so to fortify Ukraine that no one will ever dare attack you again.
Boris Johnson there. Let's take a look at some other main stories from the capital today. A teenager has been jailed for driving the wrong way through the Blackwall Tunnel in a stolen car. Let's take a look at this footage. Johal Ratauer, who is 18 from Grays in Essex, caused the crash in the early hours of the 6th of August last year. Luckily, no serious injuries were caused to the driver of a Mercedes van he crashed into. However, he did cause £80,000 worth of damage to the van and the stolen Range Rover that he was driving. A total loss of £585,000 of revenue was lost to Transport for London due to the Blackwall Tunnel having to be shut for more than 2 hours during rush hour traffic. Police have launched an appeal to find a missing teenager from East London. Officers said they are increasingly concerned for the welfare of Zorais Mohammed, who is 19 years old. He was last seen leaving home in Thorold Road in Ilford at around 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 27th of April. Police said he was last seen wearing a black and white zip hoodie, black baggy trousers and sandals. The family of those who were murdered in a home in Bermondsey has paid tribute to their 4 relatives. A crowdfunder also has now raised more than £11,000 to cover funeral costs. The fundraiser was organised by Judith Hutchinson, who said they were a remarkable group of people, warm-hearted and fun-loving. Samantha Drummond and her mother Tanisha Drummond, grandmother Dola Hill, and Ms Hill's husband Denton Burke were found with stab wounds by police on the 25th of April. 28-year-old Joshua Jacks appeared at the Old Bailey earlier, charged with murder. Members of the UK's major theatre unions have been protesting against the sudden closure of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cinderella run in the West End and have warned of more to come. It comes as multiple cast and crew said they found out over the weekend via Twitter that the show will be ending its run in just 6 weeks' time, as opposed to their employers informing them in advance. Thousands of illegal super-strength vapes aimed at children have been seized in raids on Oxford Street. Well, that's according to our sister paper, the Evening Standard, who carried out an investigation. The Trading Standards and Met police officers took action after the Standard alerted them to the sale of Chinese-made Geek Bar Pros, which have twice the legal limit of nicotine, the equivalent of smoking 125 cigarettes. Well, Westminster City Council removed £58,000 worth of the illicit e-cigarettes and counterfeit goods in sealed evidence bags from 2 businesses last Tuesday. Now, despite a disappointing 3-0 loss to Manchester United last night in the Premier League, more important things than football were the concern of Brentford manager Thomas Frank and midfielder Christian Eriksen. The two have paid a surprise visit to a heart screening initiative in West London. The event was organised by Cardiac Risk in the Young Association with the Brentford FC Community Sports Trust and succeeded in its aim to get 200 young people checked for undiagnosed conditions. Eriksen, of course, suffered a cardiac arrest on the pitch in Denmark's opening game of the Euros last summer and has since been fitted with an implantable cardioverter defibrillator device.
I think it's very important. I mean, to get the clear of something you can avoid. I think it's a very healthy thing to do, and obviously it's something that, even in my case, something happened like you wouldn't know what's going to happen. So to get that cleared out of the way from a doctor's perspective is only a positive thing.
It's a little bit, it's a little emotional to stand here today. I must say, because that tragically death of Rob. I think it's a very good way of keep remembering a very good friend of mine, and it's such an important thing. Hopefully these testing these days will hopefully maybe save 1 or 2 lives.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for coming down.
The fans were invited through an email and it was fully booked within 24 hours, and now today and tomorrow we're getting all these young people screened, which is for a great cause. We discovered Cry after Robert passed away in November 2018. We got in touch with them, explained what happened to Robert, did a bit of research, found out more about them. It was kind of perfect support. Brentford Football Club got involved and we've just been supporting them ever since. They do a lot of good work. They screen young people between 14 and 35.
The sort of things we're looking for are any what we call rhythm disturbances of the heart. The heartbeat should be within a certain range, and if it goes outside that range, either too fast or too slow, then we can indicate there's a problem. Or we actually look for the muscle of the heart, and we can actually see the electrical system and how that muscle works with the electrical system, and we can pick up electrical abnormalities.
Doctors, medics, fantastic, really friendly, and they clearly know they do something good for others, and also love to see all the fans that are here. And there was actually a story with 2 of the fans that played football where they experienced one of their teammates, dropped to the ground with a cardiac arrest.
Thank you so much for coming along today.
No, good course.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
And sadly to hear what happened.
I honestly still get really emotional about the whole thing, but the support from the club, from fans, from friends, family, it's unbelievable, and to be able to continue carrying his legacy on as well as helping other people that could potentially have the same difficulties, it's kind of what keeps me going, if I'm honest.
There you go. Let's take a look at the weather before the break. Staying dry, lows of around 11 degrees overnight. Tomorrow morning we'll have a rather cloudy but dry start to the day. In the afternoon, sharp showers will push in from the west and highs of around 17 degrees. Looking ahead to Thursday, staying dry, could be looking at around the 20-degree mark though, and Friday a similar picture. Right, we're taking a short break now, but stay with us. The Gadget Show's Jason Bradbury on why we should think about the carbon footprint of new technology we buy, thinking twice about whether to trade in our old phones for the newest models. Welcome back to London Live News. Let's take a look at some of the day's main UK headlines affecting Londoners. BP's profits for the first 3 months of this year have more than doubled after oil and gas prices soared. The energy giant reported an underlying profit of $6.2 billion. That's around £4.9 billion. That's compared to over $2.5 billion in the same period last year, well, ahead of expectations. Rising profits have prompted calls for a one-off windfall tax on energy companies to help UK households grappling with the rising bills. Some are paying well over £1,000 a year more from April this year. And of all the countries in Europe, the UK ranks 4th for having the most overweight and obese adults. Obesity has reached epidemic proportions in Europe, causing an estimated 1.2 million deaths every year. That's according to a major new report by the World Health Organization. Well, the pandemic has made things worse in the UK due to drops in exercise and increases in the consumption of foods with high fat and sugar and salt. New technology in our lives is often considered at the forefront of sustainability. However, new research suggests many are unaware that new tech production is damaging the planet. Well, according to an online group, Research Without Barriers, only 1 in 10 think technology production is a significant contributor to the carbon emissions produced. Well, former TV presenter of The Gadget Show and gadget enthusiast Jason Bradbury joined me to talk through the figures.
Most people, most consumers are aware that air travel has a huge impact in terms of global carbon emissions. The impact figure is actually 3%. So 3% of all global carbon emissions are down to us traveling around in aeroplanes. And I'm guessing that includes freight as well, right? But what most people don't know, I certainly didn't know this, and this is huge, is that the production of new devices, new digital devices, so consumer electronics, is 2% of global carbon emissions, which is incredible. So when you consider that what that's down to is not only the extraction of various resources like silver, copper, gold, aluminium, and then the production of them in factory resources, not all of which, I'm guessing a small percentage of which have alternative fuel sources. Most of them are carbon-based factories, right? And then the freight, the aforementioned air travel is a component of that. So that's extraordinary. I don't think you'd ever equate new gadgets, new devices with something like the environmental impact that we associate with air travel. That's mind-blowing.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because we all assume any type of new technology that we get our hands on, the newest thing, we always go, oh, well, it must be very sustainable now because it's been made recently and everything is sort of geared towards that nowadays. But it's not the case, obviously, because the manufacturing of them takes so much, as you say, raw minerals from the ground, etc. What can we do then instead to kind of counteract that? Do we have to buy a lot less than we would want to?
So first of all, I couldn't come on here, right, having, banged the gong for new tech and innovation for the best part of 25 years, encouraging Britain to buy the latest gadgets with my own brand of enthusiasm without acknowledging that and saying that, look, if there is a user case scenario where you need the latest graphics card or you need the latest camera phone because maybe you produce content for your business, or if you're an architect and you need to use CAD and a particular processor is going to make that process slicker and help your business to function, if you need the gear, buy the gear, right? But not all of us need it, and trust me, I mean, I'm on social media every day producing generally videos and photographic content, right? My smartphone is 2.5 years old. My smartphone, despite that, is still 5G and it can shoot 8K video. Not that I would ever use that function. I do shoot in 4K, so I can crop in sometimes. Some of your viewers will know what I'm talking about. But I'm using a phone that's 2.5 years old. I mean, that says it all. And I'm well known for being an advocate of having the latest technology. And then when it comes to my kids, many people watching, either with small companies where they've got lots of employees or a family, there are loads of user case scenarios there where they definitely don't need the latest gear. Not only are you making an eco choice, a sensible choice, I don't want to be too preachy, but a fact is a fact, but also you can make some really significant savings, up to 70%.
Yeah.
So what these guys cover on their website is not just smartphones, it's also tablets, laptops, gaming consoles, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Also, I assume also the manufacturers are going to have to take some sort of responsibility as well in the sort of coming years. That also might affect the consumer because things might have to go up considerably in price to make them more sustainable. Yeah.
So there is that you'll notice during lockdown, after lockdown, it seems it's never ending, this kind of the friction around freight, resources, new technology, the materials that go into making new cars and new digital devices, right? It's becoming an issue, isn't it? Everything's taking longer. The supply chain is being affected. I mean, the implementation of technologies like blockchain, for example, should speed that up a little bit. But in the same way that kind of like, you'll get a bounce from, say, smart car, automated car technology around traffic congestion, because of population growth, that's only going to mitigate things for a certain amount of time. So we do need to really try and make choices and changes wherever possible.
Jason Bradbury there. Now, on Friday, tunnelling was completed on the Thames Tideway super sewer below our very feet here in the capital. The 25-kilometre tunnel runs from Acton to Beckton and will be officially completed in 2025. Well, when it opens for use, Tideway say it will prevent more than 95% of the sewage pollution that currently spills into the River Thames. I caught up with one of the lead figures in its construction to learn more. That was not long after the team celebrated by watching a live performance from musician Rob Lewis, who created a sound of the sewer composition that he played 70 metres underground.
When it's finally completed, will significantly clean up the river in London and make a dramatic difference to the ecology and the environment of the river. The story does start about 150 years ago when Sir Joseph Bazalgette put in the sewer network that's been the backbone of the network in London for all those times. And it's an amazing network. It's in amazing condition. The quality of the work is amazing. But London was a city of 2 million people. He designed it for 4 million. There's now 9 million people. So the base flow has gone up. At the same time, we've got more intense rainfall with climate change. At the same time, we've got people paving over their gardens, and at the same time, it's not a separated system; it's a combined system. So rainfall on a road and sewage from your toilet in a storm goes into the same system, and then that very quickly with the storm now, because there's very little capacity, can overwhelm the old Bazalgette system, and then you get it overflowing. The safety valve is overflowing into the River Thames, and that now typically is 40 million tonnes of sewage goes into the River Thames every year. And just as a visual for that, because I think this is quite a good one, if you were sitting by the pitch side at Wembley, looking up at the bowl of Wembley Stadium around you, that's about 1 million cubic meters, so 1 million tons of water or sewage like that. So it's 40 lots of Wembley Stadium going into our river every year before the improvements that Tideway Tunnel is part of happened.
And so will it also improve the general irrigation of London? You spoke about the intense rainfall there and what people have seen in the sort of last year or so when we've had about 3 or 4 different events like that, people with buckets outside their flats in central London. Will that be improved as a result as well?
That's a very good question. And the short answer is no, not majorly and not immediately. The long answer is probably yes, if I can explain. So we are not really changing the sewer network that's away from the Thames. What we're doing is we're replicating the river. So instead of the overflows going into the Thames, they now come into the tunnel. So we're not really changing the sewer network of London. We're just keeping it out, the overflow out of the river. It's a combined sewer overflow solution, but it does, because the flows go into the tunnel quicker than they go into the river. Around some of the major pumping stations, the flows come into the tunnel quicker than they would have gone into the river. So it does improve the operation around those pumping stations a little bit. What we're looking at with Thames Water is how we can use the tunnel's extra capacity, because it won't be full every day on the basis of that. So there is potentially extra capacity.
In terms of the scale of it is absolutely massive. Am I right in saying this is the biggest, most ambitious thing we've seen of this kind in at least Europe, perhaps?
It's probably the largest sort of its type in Europe and the world as a sort of sewer tunnel. I mean, 25 kilometres from end to end, 7.2 metres diameter, the 3 London buses that you can get down at, 24 sites, 21 shafts, 4,000 sustainable jobs. In fact, 30,000 people will have worked on the project by the time it's finished, mainly only for a few months or maybe a few years. But it's a massive project, yes. But actually, I think for your listeners, your viewers, it's things like the fact that major projects like ours, I think, have an obligation to do a lot for the local communities around them, to do a lot for their industry, so that they leave the industry in a better place than when they started, and they leave their local areas in a better place than where they started. So, leaving great public realm behind afterwards that becomes a destination for future Londoners. So there's 9 new pieces of great public realm, some of them in the river, 1.5 acres at Blackfriars, for instance. That's going to be an incredible destination with amazing sort of architectural artwork. It's going to attract people to the river. For me, as an engineer, whose most of my life has been spent building things underground that nobody sees and nobody wants to know about after you've built them, by the way. Nobody wants to be reminded that the sewer's there. They want it to work very quietly away. So it's quite nice to have something on the surface that you've left, which is a real legacy thing for the future use and benefit of Londoners.
There you go, better than the usual noises that you would associate with a sewer. You're watching London Live News with James Dickman. A reminder of our top story is coming up after the break. Plus, England and Spurs' footballing legend Paul Gascoigne has his turbulent and at times majestic life in football mapped out in a new documentary. We'll hear from its director.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just have a reminder of our top story this evening. Boris Johnson described Ukraine's resistance to the Russian invasion as the country's finest hour. He did so whilst addressing its parliament. Speaking virtually to their MPs in Kyiv, he set out details of a £300 million plan for extra military support and said the West was too slow to act over Russian aggression.
The so-called irresistible force of Putin's war machine has broken on the immovable object of Ukrainian patriotism and love of country. This is Ukraine's finest hour. I can announce today from the UK government a new package of support totaling £300 million, including radars to pinpoint the artillery bombarding your cities, heavy lift drones to supply your forces, and thousands of night vision devices. We will carry on supplying Ukraine alongside your other friends with weapons, with funding and humanitarian aid until we have achieved our long-term goal, which must be so to fortify Ukraine.
Met Police have also released a statement today on what is the 15th anniversary of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. They said officers continue to investigate the case and their dedicated team are still working closely with the law enforcement in Portugal and the German police. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann went missing on the 3rd of May 2007 from a resort in Praia da Luz. And nearly 9 in 10 car thefts go unsolved in London. That's according to analysis by the Liberal Democrats. The data has revealed the Metropolitan Police closed 89% of car theft cases last year without even identifying a suspect. It also found just 2.4% of vehicle thefts results in someone being charged. The party says it's the worst record of any police force in the country, amid calls for the Metropolitan Police to set up a car theft task force. Now, often described as one of the most gifted footballers ever for England, former Tottenham midfielder Paul Gascoigne also faced a terrible time off the pitch. His rise and fall with the tabloid media has been depicted in a new documentary called Gazza. Henry has been speaking to the director of the film about his excellence on the pitch, as well as being exploited off it.
I think it's about 35 years since I've seen a kid as good as what this lad is.
I think Gazza is such a huge part of modern British culture. He became an icon at the 1990 World Cup, and his rise and subsequent fall is something that has been such a huge story, has dominated the tabloid pages over the last 20, 30 years. And I think that we felt that there was a real opportunity here to sort of reappraise his story, to look back at what actually happened to him at that critical decade of his life, and show that the sort of forces that he was up against over that period, and illustrate, give some sort of new sense of what he was dealing with in terms of the mental health struggle that he had over that period.
With so much fame comes a lot of attention, and he maybe couldn't quite, deal with that like others could, David Beckham being a prime example. How do you go about navigating what he would definitely say he didn't appreciate in the 90s?
Well, I think that the thing is that we're talking about an era pre-internet. David Beckham actually was the sort of launch into a new world came afterwards. Whereas I think what we tried to show in our film is that actually I don't think anybody really could have dealt with what Gazza went through over that period. He is, as well as a vulnerable guy, he'd had a very, very difficult childhood. Many traumatic things had happened to him over that period. But what was unleashed on him after Italia 90, Gazzamania, was really just something that completely unprecedented. He had very capable advisors who were completely swept away by this as well. And what the sort of second half of our film is about is how the modern media, I say the modern media because actually some of these characters are still very much involved in our media today, really became incredibly intimately involved in his private life in a way which I think is unprecedented and certainly far beyond something that David Beckham and others have had to deal with in their time.
How was he disrupted by the media? What sort of things were they doing?
Well, I think you're looking at, right, really from after Italia 90, you're looking at a range of media tactics to essentially own his story. This was a period where Robert Maxwell and Rupert Murdoch were going up against each other in the circulation war. If you had a Gazza story, that sold you newspapers. So very early on, you're looking at undermining of trust in friends and family as newspapers are trying to gain access to them and convince them to sell stories. And then we know it's been documented about the phone hacking was taking place in from sort of really the mid to late 90s onwards. And Paul was one of the first people to suffer this. And really, you're talking about somebody who is essentially living in a paranoid state for 7-8 years at the top of their career, let alone the subsequent 20 years. And the effects that has on somebody can be completely devastating.
Paul was the most complete player I've ever seen. He was the best player on the planet, bar none.
Now let's sort of talk about the footballer as well. I was watching the Champions League recently and someone asked whether Phil Foden was the most naturally gifted player we'd ever had, for England. And instantly someone else said Gazza. Now, I think so many generations would say the same. Why is he always talked about? What is it that about him that why is he viewed as such a great footballer?
Because he was totally fearless. He had this incredible charisma. That's the thing about Gazza, is the reason he became so famous, the reason this film came about is off the back of his personality and the way that his personality and his ability sort of joined together and made him this unstoppable force. When he played at the Italia 90, he was completely unfazed by the fact that he was playing against the best players in the world, and he did what we want to see as English football fans. We want to see our players go out and compete at the top level and be absolutely unashamed about that. And Gazza was, sort of unprecedented in that degree. And I can see obviously why the comparisons with Phil Foden. But you really hope if Phil Foden could go to an international tournament and play with the personality of Gazza, because that's what made him, people who didn't really like football fell in love with Gazza. And it took English football to a totally new level after Italia 90.
There are so many moments to choose from, but you personally, what would be your favourite Gazza moment? Because there's so many, as you said, 1990, but there's Euro 1996 as well as playing for Lazio. There's some fantastic moments.
Well, I mean, I'm a Spurs fan, so for me it's that 1991 FA Cup run, just completely extraordinary. That was when his talent was absolutely at its peak. What we show at the film is actually how that was potentially linked to how his mental state was also becoming increasingly addled at that point. But he played, when he was in that mood, he played football on a level that was completely above everybody else on the planet. I hope people watch the film and understand that perhaps we need to look at these young sportsmen on our screens and understand the extraordinary pressure that they're under and consider them as people as well as heroes.
I've got worse though. I'll probably get worse as well.
Gascoigne, yes, he's got! That documentary, Gazza, is available to watch online now. Right, stay with us for our final part of this evening's programme. We'll have some new music for you, particularly any alternative indie fans out there. Rainn Byrns will be here with his new track and to tell us about his upcoming gig in the capital.
Wasting time, what have I got on the line? Living could be easy if I don't.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. Now, the art rock band Jojo and the Teeth are settling in here in the capital after their wild musical journey has taken them around the world, from the Rocky Mountains in Canada to festivals in the Isle of Wight. The band, a collection of two Canadians, an Isle of Wight duo and a Surrey man, are gearing up for gigs in the capital. They spoke to Helena about their new single, Don't Get Too Heavy. But first, let's take a listen.
Wow, okay, well there we go. That's the new single, Don't Get Too Heavy, and we will talk about that in detail in just a moment. But first of all, I want to welcome you to London Live and also kind of ask how you all ended up here in London, because I know that, you know, you've been around pretty much around the world, yeah. So, you know,
I wouldn't say world, but we've been around.
Yeah, so how did you kind of end up living here?
Where to begin this story? Rylan and I are from Canada. We're from the west prairies of Canada.
Yep.
We've been in a band together since we were kids, and we were on tour as a duo when we came across a trio from the Isle of Wight. They opened, that was Keir's band, Keir. That was Keir's band, then band, and our bass player, Max. And then I thought, we would sound really good together. And so, like a sane person, I stalked them back to England after the tour and suggested we spend a summer making music together.
Absolutely.
We did like a reverse Fleetwood Mac.
We did a reverse Fleetwood Mac, yeah.
The North American people came over and stole a British trio.
Yeah. And then we met Andy later through Keir. They used to play in a function band together. And so they're from the Isle of Wight. We're from Canada. We were living on the Isle of Wight for a bit, and then we went to Wales. Then we went to London, and then we left London because of COVID, and now we're finally back in London. That's a very condensed version,
Absolutely.
But hopefully I hit all the right spots.
Well, okay, there's a real mix of places, you know, with this band. I guess I wonder that, does the musical style of each kind of individual place or the vibe of each individual place contribute or influence your sound at all? Keir, I wonder.
Maybe. I mean, these guys are from Alberta, and that's kind of a big country thing over there, and I definitely took a lot of influence off of them from that.
We're bringing the country vibe.
As
You
you
might
can tell
not
by the
know by
cowboy
looking
hat.
at us, but we're country bumpkins.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the new single, Don't Get Too Heavy. First of all, just tell me, what's it about?
Don't Get Too Heavy, we wrote at a time when we were a little disillusioned with our careers and the music industry as a whole. We were still touring as a folk duo, which is super not our bag. And we kind of had visions of being in a big rock band and all the fabulousness that goes with that. And yeah, we were just living in the prairies and like, what are we doing with our lives? And so we wrote it as a love letter to ourselves. It didn't really start off like that, but that's kind of what it evolved into, was just reminding myself to not get too heavy and to not let all of the weight of my own expectations of my own career. And I think that translates into anything, just expectations in life of what it should be like, and kind of more to enjoy where you're at.
And Rylan, that feeling of being a bit disillusioned, did that have anything to do with the COVID pandemic? Because we know that that was a really difficult time for artists in particular. How was that for you and for the band?
It does seem like a timely song to come out, but
yeah, strangely enough.
Yeah, because it was strange. You had no idea what you were going to be doing, and everybody, I guess, like, artists are good people to deal with a situation like that, because you just get creative and find new ways to put things out. We were recording things from 4 corners of the UK and basically trying to still create things along the way, but it is definitely nice to be back and just playing it the way you want to do it. Yeah.
You have some gigs coming up in London, so why don't you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah, we have our single release for the new video, which we're very excited about. That's on May 6th.
At the Camden Assembly.
Camden Assembly, so that'll be a good one. Very excited for that.
Oh, and have you guys managed to explore Camden a lot? Because you have very Camden vibes, all of you.
We get told that. I get told that a lot when I'm in Camden. This lady came up to me and she's like, when I was young, this is what Camden used to look like. It used to look like you. And then I have this Western accent. She was like, you really ruined this. She was introducing me to her daughter or her niece or something to prove how cool Camden was. And then I did, obviously not from Camden. The moment was ruined. No, actually, not really, because we're working our butts off and we gig there a lot. So we really just pop into a venue. Yeah. All we've really seen in London are the insides of venues.
Jojo and the Teeth there, that single is out now. Some more music to end on now. The South London indie artist Rainn Byrns is celebrating the release of his new single, Never Ending Story, with a gig at the Waiting Room in Stoke Newington tomorrow night. If you don't know much about Rainn, you will shortly. He joined me earlier, but first, let's hear from the track.
So what if I'm wasting time? What have I got on the line? Living could be easy if I don't let life displease me. Every waking day I'm painfully conscious that I'm fading.
Rainn, thank you very much for joining us. We just heard a little bit from Never Ending Story. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind that track.
So it's kind of like feeling, rubbish, under the weather, down and out kind of thing. So kind of starts off like I'm just complaining, and then when it gets to the chorus, the verses and stuff, it's sort of being like, oh, everything's actually all right. I'm kind of gaslighting myself.
Okay.
So it's kind of there are 2 kind of dialogues represented by me and the therapist in this video. So.
Yeah. So is it a chat you're having with yourself then, an internal monologue, dialogue, as you say, born out of your own sort of personal struggles, is that right?
Yeah, sort of feeling disappearing and, fading away, not feeling super important or anything. It was, at the heart of lockdown as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were maybe feeling like that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if this was born out of the pandemic, whether or not that sort of feeling of monotony as time went on, and then coming out the other side of it and thinking, oh, what we got to do now?
Yeah, big time. I used to go to the same cafe every day, get the same little vegan snack and the same just awful coffee order every single day. And I became a regular there. And, day in, day out, just came home one day and I was like, what have I become? That kind of thing.
Well, you become a musician, as we become, with a good track out. Is it going to be part of an album, or is it something to build for as you move through this year?
So it's part of an album. It's the first single. Maybe a couple more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking forward to doing the other singles and getting them out there and stuff like that.
How would you describe yourself as a musician then? You've got a very sort of particular singing voice. Is there a bit of Bob Dylan impersonation from South London in there a bit?
Kinda. I really like Harry Nilsson and stuff like that as well. Bob Dylan, obviously. Lou Reed is really cool. Jonathan Richman. I guess like all the musicians that kind of like, they don't appear to really care about what people sort of think of them, and just kind of like happy to, you know, put exactly what they're feeling on paper with no like flowery bits or anything.
Yeah. Well, I read a little bit about it. You said alternative indie rock. I thought, yeah, that's fine. And then it's a slash sort of bedroom pop. What does that mean?
I record it all in my bedroom, so I guess that's what makes it bedroom pop. Yeah, I record everything on like old tape machines and stuff. So, like, yeah, it's just kind of me going a bit crazy with some old machines and getting a song at the end of it.
Well, it's a difficult industry out there. A lot of new people are no longer bands. It's kind of one-man bands these days. Everyone's called Rainn, Byrns, Sam Fender, Jade Bird, Jake Bug, things like that these days. The sort of old-school bands are really dying out, and it's just about sort of someone's individual name. Why is that, do you think? And how do you kind of carve your own niche in that environment?
Well, I think we live in quite like an individualist culture at the moment. With like, you can curate exactly who you want to be online, and that is the kind of content that people do want to sort of like consume and you know, enjoy. I think for me personally, like I have quite strong ideas of what I want the music to sound like. I mean, growing up in the middle of nowhere, I grew up in Texas and just like the middle of nowhere in England as well. I kind of had to like become my own band. Yeah. Because there were no other musicians really around. So.
Do you not think would you not work well with the band? Do you much prefer writing and doing your own thing on your own?
I think for this album, it's like very much like a, you know, I wanted to make an album that was mine. You know, I want to move forward, maybe explore with like band. I have a backing band live as well, called the Burnouts. It's like Rainn, Byrns and the Burnouts live. So we do like stuff together. Yeah, I just kind of want to like explore each different way of recording an album, and yeah, maybe collaboration is on the horizon. But
yeah. Rainn at the Waiting Room tomorrow night, and that single is out tomorrow as well. Let's just take a look at the weather for you now. Staying dry this evening, lows of around 11 degrees overnight. Tomorrow morning we'll have a rather cloudy but dry start to the day. In the afternoon, sharp showers will push in from the west though, and highs of around 17 degrees, so staying quite mild. Looking ahead to Thursday, also dry but could be at around the 20-degree mark, and Friday a similar picture. Right, that is all we've got time for today. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow. There is plenty more content from our news team though. Head to our social channels, search for @LondonLive. But for now, good night.